Hello. I will not be doing the Steve Ballmer dance. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Caroline. I actually realized after the fact that to properly quote Steve Ballmer, I would have needed a fourth developers in that chant. But nonetheless, I hope it gets across the point of this talk, which is even Steve Ballmer can be right about something. Sorry, Steve. It was a very heartfelt goodbye from Microsoft. But so I've got 25 minutes or so to talk to you guys about how big of a deal developers are and why we need to be paying attention to their needs and why we need more of them. Just by quick show of hands, how many of you are yourselves developers? Excellent. So then you're going to love this. You're going to think it's pandering, but it is not, because I am taking this message all over the country in the next 4 months because it is such a big deal. I'm going to not try to put my water up here. Instead, I will leave it there. So here's the thing. We, as you may have heard, have a new world on our hands, one that is connected through the internet, and this internet thing is not a fad. Not a fad, seriously. There's a guy named Tom Friedman who once said the world is not flat, and he is a liar. Sorry, he said the world is flat. That would make him a liar. The world is not, in fact, flat. But what is the World Wide Web. And that's a really, really big idea. That's a really powerful idea when you consider that if all links are created equal, if you can sling the code that creates the sites, that connects the dots, that makes something useful, you have a tremendous amount of power. And the fact that you can now do this without their permission, without anyone's permission, is a really big deal. That's the book, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about two undergrads who had just recently left UVA. I guess technically we had graduated. When we started the company that would become Reddit, Steve and I were still seniors at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. I make a note of that because we were not at Stanford, we were not at MIT, we were in Charlottesville, Virginia. And we moved up to Medford, Massachusetts, and as Caroline in fact said, we were in the first round of Y Combinator. This was before anyone had ever heard of it. The entire concept of YC, this notion of an accelerator, not quite an incubator, but just here's some money, take $6,000 per founder, live for 3 months and work your butt off, basically living as a graduate student with pizza and some basic necessities, to build something that 3 months later you can then pitch to a room full of investors. Now, today Y Combinator is the most sought after demo day, I would argue, in the world. But back then, that demo day was like, I don't know, 14 of Paul's rich friends that he had browbeaten into coming to hear from a bunch of geeks who had built some cool stuff. But the thing that ends up getting lost in all of this is by the time you hear me on stage, or even by the time you see Paul Graham writing his essays and talking about things as a pundit like he is today, you forget where it all began. And this was in fact the first photo of me and Steve, and this is in fact what we were thinking a month into Y Combinator. We had just graduated from college. Neither Steve nor I had ever really built anything for people. We had been building things for our Quake 2 clan. I'm very proud of that website I made for Damage Incorporated. It was the name of the clan, don't be worried, it's a video game team. You know, Steve's first web application was actually something he did for his senior thesis, and it was something that maybe, you know, a few people used. It wasn't something at scale, it wasn't something that the world would be judging, and yet, fortunately, we had people around us at Y Combinator who themselves were figuring stuff out, who just said, launch, just ship, just create stuff, get it out there, and realize that this momentum will start taking you places. Now, back then, Reddit was written in Lisp. Yes, I know, all the developers just did a spit take. You were like, what? Lisp? Yes. Yes, and that wasn't just because Paul Graham loves Lisp. It was because Steve also really loved Lisp. And he thought, you know what better language to write this web app in than Lisp? Unfortunately, after about 4 months of literally sleeping with his laptop, because the site was so unstable, we eventually converted to a little language known as Python. Because there just frankly weren't enough libraries to support that kind of full-scale web development on Lisp. Steve earned the ire of the Lisp community online. That Reddit blog post, he handled it really well. It was one of those really tough transition moments where he had to say to everyone, listen guys, I'm sorry, we're just gonna have to switch. And there are a lot of Lispers to this day who probably still hate Steve for that. But the moral of the story is this was 2005, and you know, we were here. I actually found it on Google Street View. This is where Reddit was started. It was, we rented out the top floor of this little place, unassuming building in Medford, Massachusetts. Again, this story started with two guys meeting each other in college at the University of Virginia. Reddit's life began in this unassuming home in Medford, Massachusetts. At no point have I said anything about a Silicon Valley zip code, let me stress that. And this is what it looked like when we first got it online. And I show this mostly to embarrass myself, but also to prove the point that launching is what matters. Minimum viable product has become a cliche for a very good reason, and that is because I work with founders all the time through Y Combinator or just random people I meet here in New York Tech who cannot ship, who cannot just get their freaking idea out the door, and injecting this mentality into people, showing them just how embarrassing that first version really can be, is a way to do that. Side note, you'll also notice on this very early first version of Reddit, the first post that I made was the Downing Street memo, which is some interesting foreshadowing. And then you'll notice I also have -1 karma, and that is because Steve is a jerk and he downvoted me. Because there was only 2 of us on the site, so I knew exactly who it was. Could not fool me because I could see him right across the table. But this story of how Reddit began is not at all unique to the internet. In fact, it's not even one of the most successful. Today, Reddit has grown up quite a bit. And it's shocking that it all started before 81 million unique visitors a month. It was here. This is where it was in 2005 when we launched, and here's where it is today. Now again, this is not a testament to anything Steve or I did. This is a testament to how much the world has changed in just a little over, 8 years. All right, and when we first set up those servers, we actually had to set up servers. We ordered them from Newegg, assembled them in our apartment, and brought them down to a co-location facility which had man traps. Now, I mean, really, it was one of the advertisements that they put. It was like, don't worry, your servers will be safe. We have man traps. We never actually saw one of them working, but I assume it was kind of like that laser thing in Resident Evil. The fact that we had to do, few people know what I'm talking about, the fact that we had to do this much work just to get servers online, and 5 years later, when we launched Hitmonk, we never saw a single server because we went on Amazon. And like so many of you, we've seen how much cloud technology has changed the world. It's made it so possible and so trivial to start a website. If you can pay your cell phone bill, you can probably pay for a hosting account. And that's amazing. You don't have to see servers anymore. You really can start from a beginning that's here and come to here and actually do it in much shorter time. And we were lucky because we were standing on the shoulders of many giants before us, right? The story of Reddit, the story of Web 2.0, remember that? Could not have happened without open source software. Everyone of you knows this. But the fact remains that this continues to be something that we improve upon and continue to grow. And frankly, I am jealous, extremely jealous of all the people who are now just getting started as developers because of all the resources that are available. Now, you guys are all fans of APIs, all right? So we know that is a big part of the equation. We actually at Reddit do a not great job of this. Our documentation is kind of good enough. We've never really had the resources to actually have someone who is a full-time API evangelist, someone who could actually go out and start sponsoring hackathons and getting people building stuff on our platform. If I could do it all over again, this would be a bigger deal. In fact, I sit on the board of Reddit now, and this is something that I bring up with our CEO, Yishan, who obviously is a very smart dude with a lot of stuff going on. But this is where we can win, by simply giving developers resources. Now we're lucky because a lot of our user base is already really good at writing code. Not all of those 80 million users are, but a good number of them are. And what happens out of that, when you just give a little bit of freedom, and even a mediocre API like ours, is you see amazing things happen. This is Alien Blue. Now I will be the first to admit, this is the best way to read Reddit, and I would argue it's even a better experience than in the browser. And it's an app that I hope all of you have. I have no affiliation to it other than I'm a huge fan. It was developed by a massive team of 500 people. I'm just kidding. It's one guy. He's a freelancer. He does this on the side. And he lives in Australia. Fun fact. This is an amazing application, an amazing iOS app that is just a glimpse of what is possible. And like I said, we still haven't done enough to encourage this. Again, if we could do this all over again, or if I could have a magic wand, this kind of API evangelism, showing off stuff like this, and more specifically going to the events where people are building things and helping them build on our platform is a top priority. Now, these events are great. I love getting free Red Bulls. I love spending long weekends with people who are building stuff. But we still don't even have enough people who are able to build stuff, right? We live in this amazing age where if it's not already clear, any one of you who can write code possesses the most valuable skill of this century. And what's so amazing about it, and this is the thing that I still can't get over, is that this is simultaneously one of the most valuable skills of the century. Literally every portfolio, every company I know and work with is hiring developers right now, and I would wager at every single one of your companies, you'd be very, very happy if I could show you, I could introduce you to a developer and say, hey look, she's looking for a job, she's amazing. Every one of you would throw her an offer, right? We don't have enough supply to meet the demand, and it will continue to grow. And what's so bizarre about this is we know how great these jobs are. We know that they provide great salaries. That we know that you get to work in your flip-flops and eat M&Ms. The culture is, it's very work-life balance. Folks, there are a lot of reasons to get into it. And yet, we still have this huge disparity. And yet, most of the people who are excelling in this industry, whether it's Steve Huffman, my Reddit co-founder, whether it was Mark Zuckerberg, literally any sort of famous builder of this world, they were all largely self-taught using resources that are freely available online. So what happens when you have this amazing, valuable skill that we can't push enough people toward, and yet all of it is so freely available? How do we still not connect these dots? How do we still not get to a place where we can get people taking advantage of all this? In Code Academy, Rails for Zombies, classes in General Assembly, there are even Khan Academy videos. There are so many forces trying to get at this, but we still have so much more to go. And so I actually look to a lot of the developers, whether it's in this community, whether it's in New York Tech, or just generally speaking, to continue to evangelize for learning how to code because it is so freaking valuable and because we all need so many more of them. And I'll get into this a little bit more in detail, but I want to talk about some of the really actionable, cool stuff that I'm seeing. So there's a company that went through Y Combinator called CrowdTilt, which loved what Kickstarter was doing, but wanted to have people get the chance to just crowdfund a tailgate. They don't necessarily want to shoot an indie film starring Zach Braff. They just want $500 to buy some ribs and beer. So it was a really simple API for crowdfunding anything. It could be a charitable act like saving this toy store, or it could be whatever you want. They've built out an API and even used, ate their own dog food, as they say, to build a platform for launching your own crowdfunding page using their own API. This is an amazing way to find out if your API is actually any damn good. If you don't even want to build on your own API, no one else will. No one else will. It is actually not unlike any app development, the same sort of mental test you have to put yourself through when you launch something on the App Store, you put up a website for the first time is this better than the back button? Is this something that is going to capture someone's attention and be something worth investing their time in? Because I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are Sean Parker and you bring 100 celebrities to the launch of your brand new world-changing web app. If no one wants to use it, no one will use it. And that's what's great about the internet, right? I mean, it forces us to bring our A game. I'm sorry, Sean, he's clearly a talented dude, but the lesson to be learned there is you've got to make something people actually want to use. It's a reason why the Y Combinator motto is make something people want. It seems really self-evident, but your API needs to follow the same rules, because I don't care how much Red Bull you serve, they might use it at the hackathon, but they're not going to build beyond that if they don't actually feel invested in it. And what you're asking for is a huge, huge ask, right? Because I've already said, these people, developers who are capable of creating all of this value know damn well how valuable they are, because people like me are telling them at every possible opportunity that you have the most valuable skill of this century and your time is valuable. So that puts the onus on all of us who want them to build stuff, who want them to build more Alien Blues and more whatever it is on our APIs. The onus is on us to really show that this is worth their time. And I mean, Evernote is a great example of a company that has done a very, very good job building out a developer community, really encouraging people to build on what is a pretty robust API. Now, even nonprofits are getting into this. I was fortunate enough to participate in a DonorsChoose.org hackathon about a year or so ago as a judge here in New York. And it's amazing to see what happens when even nonprofits, right? Nonprofits, not typically known for being at the bleeding edge of technology, are actually building out APIs to make it really easy and amazing to visualize all the great projects that are happening on their site. In the case of DonorsChoose, if you don't know about them, please take notice. It's a direct way to give funding to specific classroom projects all over the country, and there's no overhead. If If you give $1 to a classroom project in Des Moines to buy an iPad for a class with students with autism, that dollar is going exactly to that iPad. And if you're lucky, you may actually get a bunch of handwritten thank you notes, which are an extra perk. But like, you start seeing more and more of a focus on this, and it's easy to get really excited. It's easy to think, APIs for all the things, right? It's tempting. It is tempting. But that's not necessarily going to mean people will use it. Field of Dreams was a great movie. That slogan does not apply to the internet. If you build it, they will not necessarily come. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how many rounded corners you put on the documentation. Like, this actually has to show some value. It has to actually capture someone. Now, an obvious way to do that is hackathons, right? Is that the alternative? Just hackathons for all the things. Get people an excuse to come on out, enjoy some Red Bull, have some fun. And that is a very reasonable way to go about building that audience and building that developer community. But you should be thinking about your API and building that community the same way you think about building your product and building the community of supporters and evangelists around it, because it's the same thing, except you're asking for something even bigger than just, oh, hey, can you use my blah, blah, blah website. You're asking for people to actually build, to actually not just take time to use your thing, which is very valuable, but to take their time and their energy to build something amazing. And remember, there are lots of cat photos. We have an entire subreddit, aww.reddit.com, also known as aw.reddit.com, that allows people to see cat photos 24/7. So this is the competition, right? This is someone landing on your documentation, landing on your pitch, and going, you know what? I'm going to go back to looking at cat photos. But that's okay, because that forces us. And as more of these barriers start to fall, right? Because the thinking was, if you wanted to participate in the Industrial Revolution, you had to open a factory, which is a bit of an ask. Today, with the internet revolution, you only need to open a laptop. And it can be a couple of undergrads at school, it can be a stay-at-home mom, it could be anyone with an internet connection and the technology to start building. And as this stuff starts to change, one of the things that I also cannot stress enough is that hopefully I've already convinced you that this skill is extremely valuable, is that for people who have it, this century will be theirs to decide what they want to do, what kind of world they want to make out of it. For those who do not, this becomes a very, very different discussion. The opportunities become much, much, much more limited. And that's why the organizations that are doing a lot of the great work to get people writing code who don't just look like me, who aren't just white dudes, right, is so important. And that's why these organizations matter, because we need the internet to live up to its fullest potential. We need this century to be as great as it can be, and it won't be until everyone has that kind of power. But it's happening, it's actually happening. And what's so cool is, you all are sitting here with a tremendous opportunity, because you are in a lot of ways, you are the ones who could be that first taste, right? You are the ones who could convince the kid or convince the person to show up and actually think, yeah, maybe I can build something. Maybe there's something fun I can build out of this. Maybe there's some way that I can understand that this is important. And no pressure, but the fate of the century depends on it. So thank you. And if you have questions, hit me up on the Twitter. Thank you.